Does homework feel like a bit of a distant memory? Are your school books gathering dust on your bedroom shelves? Can't tell the difference between the particle model and Pythagoras anymore? Well, Bitesize Daily is here to help, and while schools are out, the learning is not. Guys, we've got you. Hello one and all, and welcome to another chapter of Bitesize Daily with me, Katie Thistleton. In the next hour, we'll be supporting you through studying at home and helping you manage your workload, alongside some top tips on looking after your mental health. In case you don't know, it's 20 minutes per age group, so 11 to 12-year-olds, you're first, then 12 to 13-year-olds, and then finally, we'll come to you 13 to 14-year-olds. Here's what's in store for you today. We've got an action-packed Bitesize Showcase show lined up for you. On Wednesdays, we focus on mental well-being and explore some useful ways to manage those stress levels. So keep your eyes peeled for Wellbeing Wednesday content throughout the show. We're looking at maths, science and D&T. And to top it all off, we'll be sharing some more inspirational extracts read by familiar faces in the Big Read. OK, team 11 to 12-year-olds, let's get started, shall we? Wednesdays on Bitesize Daily Secondary are all about looking after your mental well-being. And those that know me know that I've spoken a lot about mental health, particularly on my BBC Radio 1 show. I know what it's like to live with mental health problems. It can be really hard and feel really overwhelming and also feel like you're the only one going through it. But I also know that's not true and you can beat them. You're stronger than you might think. Today we're looking at how to be resilient, which is really important. In mental health terms, that means becoming stronger and more able to deal with life's day-to-day challenges. The main message is that you should never be afraid of asking for help if you're struggling with how you're feeling. And also, those feelings are totally normal and we all get them. It might feel daunting to open up and talk to somebody, a trusted person, but I promise you, a problem shared is a problem halved, and you'll probably find that friends or family will have had the same feelings. Remember, we're all in this together, so never be afraid to reach out.
Obstacles, challenges and difficulties are a part of life. Being resilient can help us to manage stress, anxiety and uncertainty. Building strength to deal with things can help our confidence and our self-esteem. And asking for help when you need it not only shows courage and strength, it means you're resilient too.
It's time for maths now, so let's give a big bite-sized welcome to maths teacher and king of multiple addition, Bobby Seagull, who is here today from the comfort of his own home, social distancing. You better not still be in your pyjamas under that table, Bobby.
You better not check.
We better not look. He's got his pyjama bottoms on, hasn't he, under there? I knew he would. Rumour has it you're going to be sending us into a bit of a spin, navigating the perimeter of some shapes. Is that right?
That's right, Katie. So today we're going to get a flavour of how to work out the perimeter of simple and composite 2D shapes.
OK, so remind us, what is a perimeter?
So, Katie, the perimeter is the distance around a two-dimensional shape. So it could be around a square, a rectangle, a triangle, or even a circle, which is known as a circumference.
And can you calculate the perimeter of real objects in the world around us?
If you abide by certain rules, then you'll be able to work out the perimeters of lots of things that you're likely to see in everyday life, from parks to your family home.
Amazing. Well, before we dig into this area a little further, here's some top tips to help get us started.
Measuring perimeters. The perimeter of a shape is the total distance around its edge. This is a length and is said to have one dimension. Perimeter is measured in units such as centimetres, metres, or occasionally kilometres. To calculate the perimeter of a shape, you add up the lengths of all its sides. So, if an ant walks all the way round a piece of bread that measures 10 centimetres by 15 centimetres, it will have travelled 10 centimetres plus 15 centimetres plus 10 centimetres plus 15 centimetres, equaling a total of 50 centimetres, which is the perimeter length of the piece of bread. Sometimes shapes can be more complicated. These are called composite or compound shapes. If a security guard walks around the perimeter of this car park, They'll walk 50 metres, plus 20 metres, plus 20 metres, plus 30 metres, plus 30 metres, plus 50 metres, totalling 200 metres. Always remember to include the length of every side in your calculation.
All right, I think I've got a grasp of it. So I take it a cricket umpire would need to know how to work out the perimeter of the boundary before a match, would they, sir?
Yes, that's spot on. You could also apply the same to a builder doing some construction, or an architect as they design a modern art gallery. It applies to so many professions.
So there you go. Understanding the perimeter of something is useful for all sorts of professions that you might go on to do in the future. What are the key things that our awesome 11 to 12-year-olds need to get to grips with when it comes to this subject?
The most important point is that a perimeter of a shape is the distance around its boundary. So its length, but it may not be in a straight line, of course.
OK, great. Thank you very much, sir. This is starting to sink in. What else do we need to know? Anything else?
Yes, the boundary is always said to have one dimension, 1D, which means it's flat.
1D, like One Direction, but if they were called One Dimension instead of One Direction, which probably wouldn't be as good for a band name. How do we actually calculate a perimeter then?
Well, the answer depends on the shape. You add up the length of the sides. So for a rectangle, it's x plus y plus y. For a triangle, it's a plus b plus c. Or for a circle's perimeter, the circumference is pi times diameter.
Wow. What would you say are some of the things that most people find tricky? I mean, it all seems quite tricky to me, but what are the most common mistakes?
Oh, so the most common problems are calculating the perimeter incorrectly, not including all sides, confusing the perimeter with area calculations, and incorrectly using centimetres squared or metres squared.
Oh, you mustn't get your centimetres and your metres mixed up. Well, I'll tell you what, seeing as you've done such a good job of explaining, sir, shall we do a little quick-fire quiz to see if any of this has sunk in? You join in at home as well. Sir's going to ask me some true or false questions. Off you go.
So here's a question. True or false? The term perimeter is the distance from one side of a shape to another.
That's false, because you told me that it's the distance around the shape.
Good start, Katie. You need to go all the way around the shape.
Oh, amazing. Woohoo. Throw me another one.
Here's another question for you. You cannot calculate the perimeter of your studio.
No, I don't think I could calculate the perimeter of the studio because I can't go around it. It's within a bigger building.
Well, actually, if you look above your studio, it could be a two-dimensional object. So you can walk around it, so you can calculate the perimeter.
OK, well, I've got one right so far and one wrong, so let's see how we go with this third one. Off you go.
To calculate the perimeter of a shape, you must include all the sides.
To calculate the perimeter of a shape, you must include all the sides. I think that is true.
Very good, Katie.
Hey!
I better watch myself. I think you're going to be after my job very soon.
I don't think so, sir. I think you're definitely going to always beat me when it comes to maths. Thank you so much for your help, though. That is all a lot clearer. That's everything on perimeters for today. I'm going to have a stab at working out the perimeter of my backyard when I get home. It's tiny, so it won't take me very long. You could do the same. And don't forget to head over to the Bitesize website, where there's loads of brilliant resources, so you can explore this subject further. I've been on the edge of my seat so far. All right, I'm not sitting down, I'm standing up, but you know what I mean. Prior to today's part of the story, Ivy and Seb received a chilling message that they were being watched by something lurking in the shadows, which was a bit scary. As we pick back up with them, the two of them have just had a visit from the authorities.
Standing beneath the porch were two men in matching black uniforms. A balding, red-faced fellow with a huge belly, and beside him, a tall, lean figure with slicked back hair, chalky skin, and dark glasses. Both men wore ankle-length cloaks, gloves with gleaming silver studs across the knuckles, and hats shaped like a pirate's tricorn. "Shall I use this now, sir?" the red-faced man asked. "Try to flush out anyone who might still be here." In his hand was a large conch shell, one of the spiky, salt-encrusted ones you found on rocky beaches. When the other man didn't reply, he said, "Officer Smokeheart, sir?" The tall man turned towards him slowly, his chin raised. "Lower the shell," he said. His voice sent chills shooting down the back of Ivy's neck. It sounded like a knife, vicious and cold. "If there's anyone inside, we don't want to give them time to escape. They might reveal something useful under questioning."
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel like I get more nervous for both of them on a daily basis. What is going to happen next? To help us explore today's extract and reveal today's second subject is expert Dr. Tim Gregory. Hello, Dr. Tim.
Thanks for having me again. It's good to be back.
It is lovely to have you, and we're going to talk all about this extract of the book now. Do you enjoy reading? Are you a big reader?
I love reading. It's a big part of my job as a scientist, and it's one of my favourite pastimes as well.
Oh, lovely. Well, in this extract, how do you think the writer makes the reader feel the same sense of terror as Ivy? Because I don't know about you, but I felt pretty terrified.
Yeah, me too. You know, the author is really clever in the way that she's doing this. She's using a technique where we see the dangers unfold through description. For example, the description of the two men is really detailed, but it's really how they're dressed that creates that sense of terror. You know, those ankle-length coats that they're wearing and the studs that are all over their gloves and the hats shaped like a pirate's tricorn. They're the hats that are shaped almost like gravy boats.
I can't believe it's got a name. I didn't know it was called a tricorn.
Well, there we go. There we go.
Oh, we've learnt something there, haven't we? And how about when the tall man tells the other policeman to lower the shell? I wonder what you can do with the shell.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and usually a shell isn't a dangerous object, but it still feels tense, and that is the power of this particular extract.
Yeah, it really is. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tim. The last time I was interrogated by several people like that was to get this job, believe it or not. Not really. Another extract in tomorrow's programme. In the meantime, whilst libraries are shut, why not search your local library website or get an audio version of the book so you can explore it in full? No spoilers, though, please. Now, Dr. Tim, you are a bit of a bookworm, as you've just said, but you're also our resident science expert today, so you're going to be sticking around to discuss changes of state within the particle model. That's coming up. OK, Dr. Tim, it's time to change your hat quickly, put your science hat on. What have you got in store for us today?
So today, we're going to be learning about what happens to solids, liquids and gases when they are heated and cooled, and explain why their properties change when they change from one state of matter to another.
And what are the different processes by which this can happen?
There are a couple of processes. One of them is melting, and this is when a solid turns into a liquid as a result of heating it above its melting point. Another one is boiling, and this is the rapid conversion of a liquid into a gas when it is heated to its boiling point and beyond. Now, it's really important not to get those two confused. Another is evaporation, and this refers to the slow conversion of a liquid to a gas at temperatures below the boiling point. Another is condensation, and this is when a gas changes into a liquid upon cooling. And freezing, this is one we're all familiar with, is when a liquid changes into a solid upon cooling.
So once a substance has changed state, is that it, or can it change back again and be reversed?
Well, that's a really great question, and the cool thing about changes of state is that they're entirely reversible. For example, you can take a block of frozen ice, melt it to form liquid water, and then refreeze it again to make ice once more. But it's important to remember that when this happens, no new elements or chemicals are formed.
And what do students always find the most challenging when they're learning about this subject?
A common struggle, and one that I struggled with when I was at high school learning this, is the difference between boiling and evaporating. Boiling is the rapid conversion of a liquid to a gas at its boiling point. For example, boiling water in a kettle above 100 degrees Celsius will boil it. Evaporation, on the other hand, rather than being rapid, it's slow. It's the slow conversion of a liquid to a gas at temperatures below the boiling point. And a nice example of this is a puddle outside on a hot day. You've never seen a puddle boiling, but eventually it will dry up, even though it's far below the boiling point of water.
Oh, that's so true. That's really interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Tim. As always, there are loads of brilliant resources on this subject over on the Bitesize website. We've got you covered.
All matter is made of particles: wood, concrete, plastic, air, water, glass, steam, everything in the world, both living and non-living. Particles are very tiny, far too small to be seen by the naked eye. Particles are always moving. How vigorously or freely they move depends on their energy and how much space there is between the particles. This solid marble has a definite shape and is made of closely packed particles which occupy a definite amount of space. A solid is hard to compress as there is very little space between the particles. These particles vibrate but are held closely together by a strong binding force. A liquid takes on the shape of the lowest part of the container that it's in. These particles in milk are closely packed and touching each other, but unlike particles in solids, particles in a liquid have a weaker bond and are constantly moving, flowing over and around each other. Liquids take up a definite amount of space and cannot be compressed. A gas is made up of widely spaced particles. The particles are able to move around freely and randomly to fill up the available space. A gas has no definite shape of its own. It takes up the whole shape or space of its container. Here, the whole room.
Right, now it's time for our pick of the day, which is design and technology. And we're going to be looking at ergonomics. If you didn't know, ergonomics is how we design products that are efficient and easy to use. We're now going to meet a sports designer who uses ergonomic design when creating new sports products. Let's find out more from the BBC Bitesize website.
This is Laura. Laura knows it's essential for sportswear to function in very specific circumstances, and she wouldn't design a tuxedo to wear when cycling.
It's just not going to help performance.
Precisely. And each situation can help us identify new design opportunities. Isn't that right, Laura?
Design context is the circumstances or settings that a product is used in. Research into this can help us identify new design opportunities. For example, sportswear needs to work in very specific situations. It should be flexible, comfortable, and help regulate body temperature. More research into this context can give us new design ideas, so we can actually make sportswear that helps improve performance. We can identify design opportunities by looking at a problem that needs to be solved, or noticing that a product doesn't work quite in the way that it should, like sportswear that makes an athlete too hot or uncomfortable. A design must suit the needs and wants of the user. If it hinders them, then it's not that great a design.
So once you've identified a design opportunity, you can just go ahead and make it?
Once you've identified an opportunity, the next step is to identify your brief. What are you going to make, who's it for, and how will it be used? You also need to identify known and immovable constraints. When we identified an opportunity for a new type of mountaineering jacket, we asked the mountain rescue teams about what features and fabrics that they look for in a garment. We prioritised the most important functions and then work on them first. Then we source, research, and develop and test fabrics. We make mock-ups and we conduct user trials to check that all the features work as needed and get feedback and adapt as necessary.
I tend to choose a lot of things based on just what colour they are, but next time I'll be putting my ergonomics expertise to the test to make sure I've got the most suitable one. Here's something you can do at home. Find 2 items which are the same type and lay them side by side. Think about how they've been designed and which one's better. I want you to think like the designer and consider the choices they'll have made when creating the products from what you've learnt today. Thank you to all you awesome 11 to 12-year-olds. That's all we've got time for today. The next part is for the 12 to 13-year-old crew. But remember, we have loads of brilliant resources online to support you through your studies. So check them out at bbc.co.uk/bitesize. If you missed any of today's show and you want to catch up or you just want to watch it all back, all you need to do is search for Bitesize on BBC iPlayer. In amongst all this studying, it's important to keep your body healthy as well as your mind. So here's our resident doc with a quick message. And remember, at Bitesize, we've got you.
My advice is to create routine when it comes to exercise. Plan your exercise at a certain time each day and stick to it. And also each day set little targets, small goals. If you did 10 press-ups, can you do 11 today? Push yourself. And ultimately you feel better when you see your progress and increase performance. Good luck.
Welcome to all you 12 to 13-year-olds. The next 20 minutes is especially for you. We've got great teachers covering some great curriculum topics. We're going to explore some of the best ways to support you through studying at home, and we'll be giving you some top tips on how to manage your workload and your mental health. There's loads going on. Let's take a look. Today, we'll be finding out how to look after your mental health in Wellbeing Wednesday. Then we're taking you on a whistle-stop tour of maths with maths teacher Mrs. Kennedy. Then we'll be moving on to science with Dr. Tim Gregory. Our pick of the day is design and technology. And to top it all off, we have our big read with a top celeb. Let's do this. Wednesdays are all about looking after your mental well-being on Bitesize Daily. Here we're going to look at how adapting to change, like an athlete, can help build your resilience. And resilience is something that's really useful, particularly in times like this, when everything seems topsy-turvy and life is not as we usually know it. Many of the things we normally get to do at the moment, we can't. So resilience is really important.
People who are really smart and people who are really successful say that there's no failure, there's only feedback. So if you feel that you failed, if you haven't done things well, know that that's what athletes go through all the time. So be like an athlete, be like a hurdler. A hurdler is adjusting their stride pattern each time. So even if they fell down in one race, they'll pick themselves up. So see that that's part of you becoming even better and even better at what you do.
Sometimes things happen for a reason. You learn from things that happen and you actually develop your resilience and your strength within yourself to adapt and to change and to move on to a different path.
I think in life we'll always experience knockbacks, and often education brings those kind of situations around for us. The idea of being resilient, being able to bounce back from setback and handle things in as positive way as possible is really important. If you do find that things don't go to plan, try to keep things in perspective. Reflect on your experience. What could you have done differently? Maybe there was nothing you could have done differently.
It's now time to tackle our first subject of the day, one that I used to find quite difficult at school, maths. But we've got an expert here to talk us through. It is the Queen of Polygons, Mrs. Kennedy. Big round of applause for Mrs. Kennedy. How are you doing today, miss?
Very well, thank you, Katie. Great to be here. And today is all about polygons.
Yay! Oh, I know polygons. They're lovely, them. Yeah, those flowers. I got my mum some on Mother's Day, actually, to plant in her garden. Look, oh, there they are. Lovely shade of orange and red and
I think you might be talking about polyanthus. Or primroses, as we call them.
I was, actually, yeah. Is that not the right thing?
No. Polygons are rectangles, parallelograms and triangles, and we are going to be exploring how to calculate the area of a polygon.
Definitely not flowers, then. Think before you speak next time, Katie. Before we get into it in more detail, here's some key facts to help get you started.
How to calculate the area of polygons. Rectangles, parallelograms and triangles are all examples of polygons, closed shapes with only straight sides. The area of a shape is a measure of the two-dimensional space that it covers. To calculate the area of a rectangle, multiply its length by its width, or width by length. This is expressed with the formula, area equals length multiplied by width. The area of a shape is measured in square units, such as square centimetres, square metres, and square kilometres. To calculate the area of a triangle, multiply the base by the perpendicular height. That's a straight line drawn at 90 degrees from the base to the highest point. Then divide by 2. This is expressed with the formula area equals base multiplied by perpendicular height divided by 2. The area of a parallelogram can be calculated using the formula base multiplied by perpendicular height. Remember, the perpendicular height is the straight line drawn 90 degrees from the base to the highest point. It's not the length of the slant.
Let's get to it then. What would you say is the best place to start when looking at the area of a polygon, Miss?
Well, there are two things that are the most important. The area is a measure of the two-dimensional space that is covered by a shape. And the units, on the other hand, express a measure of physical quantity. So they could be different units such as metres, centimetres, pounds, pence, or a unit of time, such as a second or a minute.
OK, that's interesting. So what's the difference between a perimeter then and the area of a shape? Because it seems to me like those things are pretty much the same.
Lots of people ask this one. The perimeter is the outer edge of or boundary of the shape. If you were flying in a drone above a football pitch and looked down, it would be the outline of the pitch, which would be the perimeter. Think about walking behind one goal, right round the pitch, right back to where you started from, and you'll have scaled the perimeter.
OK, that makes sense then. Perimeter's all the way round. But what about the area then? What's the difference?
The area of the shape, on the other hand, is the space the object actually takes up. The best way to think about this is to imagine you were building a swimming pool. You'd draw the outline of the pool and then colour in the shape to identify the area that the pool takes up.
Oh, I'd love my own swimming pool, wouldn't you, Miss?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
My garden's not big enough, though. I've not got large enough area in my garden. I haven't. So where do units come into all this, then?
A common thing that always trips people up is forgetting that the unit being used in the calculations are square units, which represent area. It could be millimetre, centimetre, metre. If you get these wrong, then your area calculation will be totally wrong.
Is there anything our students can be doing at home to practice calculating the area?
Yeah, find something which is a rectangle, for example, a chocolate bar or a tile on the floor. Now have a go at calculating the area of it using what we taught through today.
I'll be honest with you, Miss, I don't have my chocolate bars for long enough to start measuring them. They're eaten very quickly. That's everything on areas of polygons for today. But as always, we have lots more brilliant resources for all your maths needs on the website. Just check out bbc.co.uk/bitesize. Now it's time to meet some workmen who are going to show us how they use what we've learnt today in their day-to-day jobs.
You measure it in square metres or square yards.
To work out a square meterage of tiles in a bathroom, you need two measurements, the length and the width, and you times that by each other, and it'll give you a square meterage.
Area is important within the loading bay. We have pallets 3 foot by 3.5, which equals 10.5 square feet.
Area is a measure of space, and it's measured in square units. I'm working out the area of this path to make sure I've got enough turf to cover it. The path is 5 metres by 2 metres, which is 10 square metres. It's important to measure it correctly so that I don't waste any turf.
It's time to continue with our big read, where Russell Kane has been reading us some brilliant extracts from the classic Oliver Twist. Yesterday, Oliver experienced his first encounter in the workhouse, and we revisit the story at dinner time, where Oliver is about to ask a question which I've got a feeling could land him in big trouble. What's that? You want more? That'll all make sense in a minute. Well, here's Russell with today's extract.
The evening arrived. The boys took their places. The master, in his cook's uniform, stationed himself at the copper. His pauper assistants ranged themselves behind him. The gruel was served out, and a long grace was said over the short commons. The gruel disappeared. The boys whispered to each other and winked at Oliver while his next neighbours nudged him. Child as he was desperate with hunger and reckless with misery. He rose from the table and, advancing to the master, basin and spoon in hand, said, somewhat alarmed at his own temerity. "Please, sir, I want some more." The master was a fat, healthy man, but he turned very pale. He gazed in stupefied astonishment on the small rebel for some seconds, and then clung for support to the copper. The assistants were paralysed with wonder, the boys with fear. "What?" said the master at length, in a faint voice. "Please, sir," replied Oliver, "I want some more." The master aimed a blow at Oliver's head with the ladle, pinioned him with his arms, and shrieked aloud for the beadle.
Hello, Governor! Ladies and gents, welcome back. Dr. Tim, who is here to explore today's big read extract. It's an absolute classic, isn't it? Have you been enjoying Oliver Twist, Dr. Tim?
I have been loving it. I loved it when I read it in school, and I'm loving rereading it now.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? In today's extract, would you say that Oliver shows bravery or naivety?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, that. And I do think in this part of the book, Oliver is naive rather than brave, because bravery is often seen as someone doing something courageous. But this isn't really Oliver's intention in this part of the book. His response relates to his inexperience, really, and his lack of knowledge. He's only new to the workhouse, remember, by this point.
Oh, I really feel sorry for him in this part of the book. I mean, I am the worst when it comes to getting hangry. You know how it is when you just want your food. Surely he knew that asking for more food would result in something bad happening to him, though. He knows how horrible they all are at the workhouse.
Yeah, I really don't think that he was aware of it at this point in the book. The author describes him as quite desperate with hunger and reckless with misery. And this means that the only thought in his head is how much he wants and needs to eat. And the other characters, their reactions really speak volumes as they gaze with stupefied astonishment, and the assistants were paralysed with wonder.
Oh, yeah, they're really great descriptions, actually. Thank you so much, Dr. Tim. It's quite bleak at this point in the book, isn't it? But I'm sure things will get better for Oliver, don't worry. It seems there's a fine line between being brave and being naive. But can you imagine being that hungry? I mean, I think I'd have wanted to ask for more too. Don't forget, if you want access to the full version of the book online, then search your local library or check out some of the other online libraries. Make time to read, because it's just a brilliant thing to do all the time, especially at the moment. Dr. Tim is going to stay with us to look at his specialist subject, which is science, of course, where today we're going to be exploring chemistry. Dr. Tim Gregory knows a thing or two about creating things that go bang and boom. So given today's subject is all about chemical reactions, we couldn't be in better company. We're looking at combustion and oxidation in relation to chemical reactions. I mean, it sounds really exciting, sir, but what do we actually need to know to get started?
It is really exciting. This is one of my favourite subjects. So, combustion is a chemical reaction when a fuel is burned to release energy. A fuel is a substance which is burned to release energy in a useful way. And the final thing we need to know is oxidation. This is when a substance gains an oxygen atom in a reaction, and this happens during combustion.
Exciting. This really does sound like fun. Can you give us an example?
There are loads of examples of combustion, but I think it's best we explore this for now on a piece of paper. I'm going to show you the fire triangle, and this shows the three things that we need for a fire to start. The first thing we've got is a fuel, and this is what we burn to release useful energy. The second thing we've got is oxygen, and in the case of a fire, we get the oxygen from the air. And the third thing that we need is to start a fire. We need a heat source. These are the three things that we need to start a fire. And if just one of these sides is taken away from the fire triangle, the fire will not start, and a fire that is already burning will quickly go out. And firefighting relies on these principles, so it's really important that we understand the science behind how fires work. The fire will go out when a fuel runs out, for example, but it's often really unsafe to leave a fire for that long. And so different types of fires need to be tackled in slightly different ways.
It's really interesting, sir, but it's also so important to have this knowledge, isn't it? So that's why if you ever find yourself with a chip pan or oil fire, for example, you cover the pan with a damp cloth because that's removing the oxygen.
Absolutely. You remove the oxygen from the fire triangle and the chip pan fire will go out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Tim. There's loads more on chemical reactions over on the Bitesize website at bbc.co.uk/bitesize. Here's a little taster.
we're going to try and collect some of the carbon dioxide. We're going to force it out of the calcium carbonate. Now, we need pretty high temperatures for this, so I'm going to use 1000 degrees C, this particular flame. Now, I wonder if we're getting anything forming on this side. Well, we've got some white on the sides there.
Right, ladies and gents, we're on to our pick of the day, which is design and technology, where we're going to be exploring anthropometrics. I hope it's easier to learn about than it is to say, because it's a bit of a mouthful. Anthropometrics is the study of human body measurement. But what does that actually mean? Well, when you sit at your desk to do your homework, does your computer chair adjust to suit your needs, like this one? Maybe you can move the arms, or maybe you can make it higher or lower, like this. Whee! That, my friends, is anthropometrics. When designers are creating and making products such as this chair, it's really important they get feedback from the people they're creating it for, so they can keep changing the products and solve any problems as they go and before production begins. Otherwise, they'll end up with thousands of chairs that nobody wants to buy. There are some great films on the Bitesize website about this. Here we're going to visit Piers, who explains the importance of producing a specification, or spec as the pros call it, when designing an uber-cool skate park.
This is Piers. Piers understands that producing a design specification is key to designing products that are fit for purpose and actually useful to other people. So how do we avoid making something that's totally pointless?
When you design, the end product needs to be fit for purpose. So to ensure this, designers produce a design specification, which is a statement that tells the designer exactly what the product has to do and what the requirements are. It's directly influenced by research and analysis. A design spec should include form, function, user and performance requirements, and also material requirements. It should also include scale of production, cost, and sustainability. So when we designed the skate park, the two most demanding requirements were the spatial constraints and the limitations on access. These two dictated how the park would be made and installed. In terms of functionality, the design specification called for a layout that would work for a wide range of purposes and uses, from international competitions to coaching primary school children.
Exactly. And in addition to producing the specification, you also need to draw out your plan, right?
Freehand sketching is used as a preliminary way to show the basic composition of design, quickly evaluate layout choices, and explore concepts, like these. Formal drawings give more information about the structure, dimensions, components, materials, and assembly instructions. These have to be presented in a clear way. An example of a type of formal drawing style is orthographic projection. It involves drawing out each side of your design in a 2D form, so you see a front view, side view, and plan view.
So, producing a design spec basically means outlining the exact requirements for the design so we know it will work.
What an amazing thing to design, eh? So when it comes to anthropometrics, it's all about planning, feeding back and problem solving until everything is 100% right. Then you're good to go. That's all the D&T we've got time for now, but I'll leave you with a little teaser. Can you think of a product that you've bought because it's nice to use and much better than an existing product that you already had? My list is endless. Right, that's almost it for today, Team 12 to 13. All you 13 to 14-year-olds, you're up next. For more support through your studies and some brilliant resources, just visit bbc.co.uk/bitesize. If you missed any of today's show and you want to catch up, or maybe you just want to watch it all back because it was so good, all you need to do is search Bitesize on BBC iPlayer. And if you want to watch it on a tablet, BBC iPlayer is free to download in your normal app store. One last thing though, 12 to 13-year-olds. It's important that as well as keeping on top of your studies, you put some time aside to get active. Here's a message from our resident doctor. And remember, at Bitesize, we've got you.
A little reminder from your favourite doctor. Now, studies are important, but so is exercise. Exercise is great for your body and for your mind. Try and make sure you do a little bit of exercise every day, at least once a day. It'll make a big difference in the way you feel, the way your body is performing, and also your performance in your studies and exams too. So do a bit of exercise. Go on.
Right then, it's your time, you awesome 13 to 14-year-olds. We're halfway through the school week and we've got some top tips coming up for you today. Let's check out what's in store. Today, it's Wellbeing Wednesday, where we're looking at the best ways to look after your mental health and helping you deal with any stress you might be feeling in these challenging times. We'll be exploring our subjects of the day, which are maths, science and design and technology. And we're revisiting our big read with another extract from Anna and the Swallow Man, read for us by none other than Russell Kane. Right, you lot, let's talk about looking after yourself on Wellbeing Wednesday, where we concentrate on your mental health as well as your studies. We know it's a really tricky time at the moment, and although studying at home can be fun, it can also come with some difficulties mentally. If you're finding it hard, don't worry, you're not alone. There's some great resources on Bitesize around mental health, like this advice on how to spot the signs of stress and the importance of sharing your concerns with friends and family.
A good indicator that you are stressed is when you have so many things to do and your mind simply can't focus.
Find something that relieves your stress. I used an adult colouring book because it's super easy and it requires no concentration, and that really helped me, but find something you enjoy.
When I realised that my worrying and stressing was getting out of hand, I knew I really needed to confide in somebody. And so I immediately went to my parents because I knew I could talk to them. So every night, even if it was what I thought was a silly worry or something really small, I spoke to them about it, and it's really surprising how much better you will feel after you speak to somebody.
It's maths up first, and we've got someone who definitely knows their perimeters from their polygons. It's the incredible Mrs. Kennedy who's joining us in the studio today. It's lovely to have you here, especially because I'm not very good at maths, so we need a proper expert. What are we going to be learning about in today's maths lesson?
Today we're going to be looking at the area and circumference of a circle.
Oh, the area and circumference of a circle. So that sounds like it's going to send us into a bit of a spin. And in my memory, I think we're going to be talking about my favourite northern dish. Steak pie, mash and gravy, yeah?
Well, we're certainly talking about pie, but a different kind of pie, and that's a really important factor in this process.
OK, great. Well, before we get into really talking about pie, here's the lowdown on some things you need to know.
Calculating the area and circumference of a circle. To work out the size or shape of a circular object, we use pi. Pi is the ratio between a circle's circumference, the distance around its edge, and its diameter, the distance through the centre. The value of pi is always the same, no matter how big the circle. Pi is a constant and an irrational number, which means it cannot be expressed as a simple fraction. So after the decimal point, the digits go on forever. For ease, we generally round its value to 2 decimal places, 3.14. To calculate a circle's circumference, the formula is pi multiplied by d. D stands for diameter. The diameter of this wheel is 40 centimetres. Pi's approximate value of 3.14 multiplied by 40 equals a circumference of 125.6 centimetres. To calculate the area of a circle, it's the formula pi r squared. R stands for radius, the measurement from the centre of a circle to the edge. This cake's radius is 7 centimetres. 7 squared is 49. Pi's value multiplied by 49 equals an area of 153.86 centimetres squared.
Wow, it's really interesting, isn't it? OK, so if we want to work out the area or the circumference of a circle, we need to use pi. So let's get stuck into a little bit of pie then, but not that kind of pie, not like a lemon pie. This kind of pie, this funny little symbol, this thing that we do in maths. So, Mrs. K, can you remind us of the key concepts around measuring things in a circle?
Yes, the area of a circle, like the end of this tin can, is a measure of the 2-dimensional space that it covers.
OK.
So the circumference here is the distance around the outside of the circle.
OK.
The diameter is the distance from one side of the circle to the other, but passing through the middle. And the radius goes from the centre to the edge of the circle.
And what about pi then? What's pi?
Well, pi is the ratio between the circumference of the circle and its diameter.
So why do we need to know about pi? And if I remember correctly, isn't pi always the same?
Yeah, pi is always the same. It's the same for every single circle because it's the circumference of the circle divided by its diameter.
OK, great. So how do we use pi on our scientific calculators then?
So when we're using pi on here, on this calculator here, I'll just turn it on, it's this little button here, but it's the second function of that little button. Your calculator might have its own pi button. So what I would do here is I'd press the shift and then get onto the second function and get it there. Press equals to pop it into the screen. And then this button here, S to D, turns it into a decimal number. And you'll see here it's 3.14159, going on forever and ever.
It's all those numbers. What's with all those numbers after the decimal point?
Well, it's an irrational number, which means it goes on forever and it doesn't have a repeating pattern. So normally we would round it and just use 2 decimal places, so round it to 3.14.
OK, that makes it a lot easier, definitely. I don't have to be writing all those numbers down. So how do we calculate the circumference of this tin can that you've conveniently got on that table next to you?
Well, before we can calculate it, we need to know the radius, the length of the radius. And in this case, it's 3.75. So we'd get that measurement, and then on our calculator, we would use the formula 2 pi r, which is the formula for circumference of a circle. And we just pop 2 multiplied by pi, multiplied by 3.75, and that gives us an answer of, if I press my S to D button, of 23.56 centimetres. And remember, it's just a linear unit. We don't need to bother with the squared for that.
OK, fantastic. And how about that circular area on the top of the can?
So if I'm looking at the area, the formula for that is pi r squared. So, and we know squared means multiplied by itself. So I would just pop pi into my calculator and then multiply it by the 3.75. You can either times it by it again or square it and then get my answer, which is 44.18, when I round it, centimetres squared.
Brilliant, you're very clever, miss. Now, for all my 13 to 14-year-old mates who are watching, are there any gotchas with this that might catch you out?
Yeah, it's really common to confuse the formulas for area and circumference, so make sure you're getting that right. Just think about squared meaning area, so that'll help you. Also, to remember the squared in the units, and also not to get mixed up between the diameter and the radius.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Miss, for all those tips. That was absolutely brilliant. That's all we've got time for on area and circumference of a circle. Massive thanks for all your help, Mrs. K. You've been ace. And don't forget that the Bitesize website has you covered with everything you need to know on this subject and more. Just check out bbc.co.uk/bitesize. Here's some of the great stuff you can find on there. Comedian Russell Kane has been sharing tales from this week's brilliant big read, Anna and the Swallow Man. I don't know about you, but I've been completely gripped by this book. Yesterday, we learned a lot about Anna's relationship with her father. Today, we see the two of them come across an uncomfortable situation with the authorities. Russell, it's over to you.
They had been making their way home from some outing or other, and it had been growing dark. Anna didn't recognise the part of the city where they were walking. Her father was holding onto her hand very tightly, and his long-legged strides forced her to trot to keep up. His pace quickened, faster and faster, as the sun dipped beneath the rooftops and then the hills beyond. And by the time it happened, they were practically running. She heard them before she saw anything. There was a man's voice, laughing, loud and jolly, so genuinely amused that Anna began smiling as well, excited to see whatever it was that was making the laughter. But when they came to the street from which the sound was coming, her smile stopped. There were 3 soldiers. "Jump!" said the smallest soldier. "Jump! Jump!" The grizzled old man in front of them did his best to follow this direction, hopping up and down pointlessly in place, but there was very clearly something wrong with his leg, a bad break perhaps. This seemed to delight the small soldier even more.
To talk to us about today's extract and to demonstrate how you can discuss a book with other people, it's Dr. Tim Gregory. So, Dr. Tim, how did today's story describe Poland at the time?
The extract today describes 3 soldiers who were intimidating an old man to the point of cruelty. And this old man is clearly being forced to do something that he doesn't want to do, and it's causing him quite a lot of pain. You know, where the author writes, "This seemed to delight the small soldier even more." This really lets the reader know that Poland had become quite an unsafe place at this time, where soldiers were walking around the streets and tormenting innocent people.
So is the old man who's jumping on one leg a sign of the times? And what about Anna's dad's reaction to it?
Yes, it feels like he's really resigned himself to fighting against it anymore. Not that he's really conformed, but the author makes us think about what would happen if he didn't obey the soldier's orders. He doesn't really have a choice. And as for Anna's dad, it feels like he's turning a blind eye to what is happening, which is really sad to read. But we have to take into account that he has his young daughter with him and what the repercussions might be if he steps up and questions these soldiers doesn't bear thinking about. So it's a really tricky situation for everybody, and the author does a really great job of making us feel incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Tim. It captures a really awful time, doesn't it?
It does.
And makes you feel very sad and concerned. Well, Russell is going to be reading another extract in tomorrow's programme. In the meantime, if you want to read more, why not search your local library online, where you can hopefully access a digital version of the book in full. Keep any important information to yourself, though. We don't want any spoilers, thank you very much. Dr. Tim is going to stick with us and talk to us about his specialist subject. You guessed it, it's science. Today, it's chemistry, where we're going to be looking at the periodic table. Right then, Dr. Tim, we're talking about the periodic table, so let's see it, shall we? Oh, look at it. There it is in all its beautiful glory.
Beautiful.
So I'm a bit of a star when it comes to navigating the menu behind the counter at the takeaway, but the periodic table looks a little bit more challenging to me.
You know, it's funny you say that, because the periodic table is a little bit like a takeaway menu. Once you get to know all the different elements or the dishes, it's easier to understand it. There is definitely a bit of muscle memory involved with the periodic table, however.
So what are we going to be looking at today?
Today, we're going to be looking at the patterns and the properties of both metals and non-metals within the periodic table.
OK, it's obviously a lot to learn here, so shall we start off with the properties of the metals? What are they?
So chemicals on the periodic table, they're grouped according to their chemical similarities. So in the case of the metals, they're mostly hard, they have a high melting point, and they're really good conductors of electricity and heat. They're also really malleable, which means they can be reshaped very easily by hitting them with tools like hammers.
Amazing. So now we know more about the properties of the metals. How do non-metals compare? What can you tell us about how they react?
The non-metals, they're a different kettle of fish. They have a huge variety of properties, and hardly any of them conduct electricity. A lot of the common non-metals are actually gases, such as oxygen in the air and the nitrogen, and other gases like neon and fluorine.
So how does the periodic table come into this?
So on the periodic table, we call the vertical columns groups. And these groups show patterns in the properties of the elements that they contain, such as the melting points or the boiling points. And this means you can make really good predictions about how those elements may react to certain things, given the information you already have about elements within the same group.
So it's almost like thinking of your class and how certain friends will get on with each other, even if they've never met before. And that's because they've got certain traits or certain interests and stuff.
That's exactly it, Katie. Elements in the same group, they have traits.
Oh, so you might be like, hey, hydrogen, you'd get on with oxygen because she's into this as well.
Exactly.
She does gymnastics. You could talk about gymnastics all day long and then they'll become friends. I feel like the penny is starting to drop now. The 13 to 14-year-olds watching, though, are probably thinking, what are the main things that might confuse me when it comes to this?
That's a really good question. And sometimes students struggle with the fact that going down the group 1 metals, there on the far left-hand side, the melting point decreases. But going down the non-metals in group 7, the melting points and the boiling points increase. You must remember here that metals and non-metals are often very different, and in fact, they're exact opposites to each other.
Amazing. That was really interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Tim, and very useful too. I'm going to dedicate as much time to the periodic table in future as I do to the takeaway menu. I'll be a professor like you in no time. So we're going to have to wrap up science here, I'm afraid, but remember to head over to the Bitesize website because we've got you covered with a range of support tools and superb resources just like this.
So how are the elements arranged in the periodic table? Are they in any sort of order?
Well, look carefully at the atomic number and mass number of each of the elements. Can you see any pattern?
Yeah. If you move along the table from left to right, then the numbers get bigger.
That's right. The elements are arranged in order of the size of their atomic number and mass number.
Well, that makes sense, I suppose.
Exactly. Now, let's look at the individual atoms which make up each of the elements. We can see that the atoms contain a larger number of particles as we move across the table.
So the atoms get larger as we move along. This periodic table's a doddle.
I'm glad you think so.
So what about the vertical columns in the table? What do they represent?
The elements are also ordered into groups. Each vertical column is a group of elements.
So why are they in groups?
Let's look at group 1 in the table. The first 3 elements in group 1 are
lithium, sodium, potassium.
Now, let's look at their atoms. Can you see any similarities in the arrangement of their electrons?
Yeah, they've all got 1 electron in their outer shell.
Exactly. Every element in group 1 has 1 electron in its outer shell. This means that these elements all react the same way with other chemicals.
So is that why these elements are all organised into the same group? Because they all react the same way with other chemicals.
Now it's time for design and technology, which is today's pick of the day, where we're going to be looking at aesthetics. Aesthetic is a word we use to talk about how something looks, and aesthetic appeal means the product will be pleasing to the eye. Those brand new trainers you want for your birthday, they've got some strong aesthetic appeal. It's common for designers to battle between the look of a product and how it functions. Here we're going to meet a textile designer who talks us through how her different fabrics can create aesthetic appeal. Keep your eyes peeled for some beautiful patterns.
This is Momtaz. She works with textiles, knows all about where they come from, and knows that certain materials are more suitable for specific tasks than others.
Textiles are made in 3 stages. The first stage is spinning, where fibres are spun into yarn. The next stage is weaving or knitting, where yarn becomes fabric. And the final stage is finishing, where the fabric is made into something useful. Textiles come in both natural and synthetic forms. So natural textiles come from plant and animal sources, like wool from sheep and cotton from plants. Cotton is used for making t-shirts, towels and other clothing. It's cool to wear, absorbent, soft and durable. Synthetic fabrics like nylon, elastane and polyester are manufactured and usually come from chemical sources. Polyester is often used for raincoats, in working clothes and medical textiles because it's non-absorbent, hard-wearing and dries quickly. I like working with synthetic fabrics because you can get all kinds of textures and effects. So, this part of the coat that I made looks all silky, but it's actually rough. I also like that you can make it look opaque or transparent, or any other way you'd like it to be. This bit here is a soft velvet. It's really nice to touch and looks very regal.
What an interesting job, eh? Bet she's got some gorgeous clothes in her wardrobe. You can see from the film that it's important that the designer is practical in her choice of fabrics that are fit for purpose, but also aesthetically pleasing, which to me and you means they make you look good. We're about to wrap up here, but I want to leave you with a little task. Can you think of a product that works well? Could be anything, a car, a bike, a pair of shoes, that you think isn't great to look at. I want you to take that product and sketch a better version, taking into account its aesthetics. Now, if I could just remember where I put my sketch pad. Hats off to you. You've made it to the end of the show. We've explored all 3 subjects and received some great tips and advice on how to maintain our mental well-being. Don't forget to head to the BBC Bitesize website for more great tips and advice to help you with your studies. And remember, if you missed any of today's show and you just want to catch up, or you want to watch it all back and spend more time with me, all you need to do is search Bitesize on BBC iPlayer. And if you want to watch it on a tablet, you can do that too. BBC iPlayer is free to download in your normal app store. Same time, same place tomorrow? Over to our resident doctor for a last word of great advice.
Dr. Alex here with a reminder to do some exercise. Whatever it is, whether it's press-ups, whether it's finding a tin of baked beans in the house to use an exercise, whether it's lifting a bag of flour, going out and cycling, whether it's jogging, find something that you enjoy and you can do each day and set challenges. Set challenges to improve each day and you'll feel really good for it, I promise you. Give it a go.
Step Up to the Plate is back.
Ready, steady, go! And this time round, the heat's being turned up in the kitchen. You've got 7 minutes left. 7 minutes.
And the pressure is even greater in the restaurant.
This is une catastrophe. Join us as we search for a new star head chef. Incredible stuff.
And a maître d' extraordinaire. Step Up to the Plate, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. on CBBC and BBC iPlayer.
Taking a closer look at American engineering inventor DeLorean, Back from the Future at 9 on BBC Two. Now containing scenes of surgery, science and nature is your afternoon train of thought as we look inside the human body.